right. Thank you so much for welcoming us this evening for this presentation. My name is Carolyn Knight. I'm the Education and Outreach Manager for Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance, and I am super excited to share some knowledge about owls tonight. And I'm joined by
I'm Julie Amato, and I am a volunteer for the Bird Alliance and also really enjoy owls and am delighted to be here.
Yeah, so we've done some owling in preparation from this. We've done a lot of literature deep dives and several interviews of other local owl enthusiasts. All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about this evening. We are going to be covering quite a bit of ground tonight, so we just wanted to lay things out for y'all. We're going to be starting with what makes an owl an owl. So, what is going to set these birds apart from all of the other amazing birds that we have sharing space with us in Santa Clara County? We're going to go a little bit into the taxonomy of these birds, so how they're related to each other and to other birds. We're going to talk about how to identify some of our local species. Now, we're going to be talking mostly about the most common species that you're likely encountering. So we're not going to be chasing any snowy owls with this one. Then we're going to go a little bit into the life history, how these birds eat, how they reproduce. These are all important behaviors to be familiar with if you want to take a look at your habitat and figuring out whether or not it's going to be suitable for an owl. And then to end things, we're going to wrap it up with a little bit of owl conservation. So, how we as people can support these awesome birds. So, owls and humanity have long been linked. Humans have had a wonderful fascination with these mysterious birds throughout history. This spans all the way into ancient history with the Greeks and the owls of Minerva. We see owls depicted in Oaxacan art from Mexico. You can even find depictions of owls in Japanese art from way back in the Edo period. So we've long been fascinated by these owls for their mystery, for their charisma, and their perceived wisdom. And I do hate to burst some bubbles today, but we will be going a little bit into the purported wisdom of these birds. Now, owls are amazingly adapted organisms. They have a lot of specializations to help them be the best at what they do. And what they do is not very nice. So, these birds are predators and they are built for hunting. And this goes all the way from the tip of their beak to the tips of their toes. And we see these adaptations on their skeletons, but also in the soft tissue and the feathers of these birds. So, starting from the very top, an owl's is often known for its excellent sense of hearing. And this is easily visible in the faces of our owls. Our owls are recognizable in part due to these wonderful pronounced facial discs. These are acting as external ears. These feathers, the very fine, tiny little feathers arranged in thousands around the face, direct sound into the ears of these owls. And sometimes, like is the case for our barn owl pictured here, they actually have adaptations in the soft tissue of their ears that makes these ears lopsided. So one ear is going to be higher than the other. Now, the cool thing about this is owls have evolved this on their own. Each species does it. So some species, their ears are completely level with each other. Some owls have a skeletal difference. So if you
Mhm.
look at the skull of a great gray owl, that skull will actually be physically lopsided with one ear located higher than the other. And in the case of the barn owls, that's a soft tissue difference. Their left ear opening is higher up on their head than the right ear. And this is what allows them to pinpoint where precisely that mouse or that vole is hiding in the underbrush. Owls also have binocular vision. So they have those forward-facing eyes we associate with predators. That allows them to get that all-important depth perception when they are hunting in a forest or a field at night. But the eyes of our owls are important not just for their placement, but also their shape. So an owl has very large eyes, and this is part of what probably feeds into our human fascination with these birds. They have very large, expressive eyes that blink the same way we do. Less of that nictitating lid that just slides sideways, like we see with whenever you get a photo of a duck or a raven, and you've got that kind of grayish lens that flips across the eye. Um, but these eyes are also shaped more like tubes than spheres. And while this gives the owl their amazing night vision, it also makes it impossible for the owl to move its eyes to the right or to the left. So if our owl friends are going to be looking around, they're going to have to move their entire head, which brings us to that neck that they are famous for. Owls actually have a couple extra vertebrae in their neck, as many birds do, compared to the mammalian seven vertebrae that we're stuck with. And that gives them a lot of flexibility, which is important as they want to look around their environment, but also to do day-to-day things like preening yourself. Down to the tips of the toes, owls have semi-zygodactyl feet. Now, this foot arrangement is really interesting. The semi aspect of this foot description means that these feet are not always arranged in a zygodactyl configuration. Now, a zygodactyl configuration is two toes in front, two toes in back. Think woodpecker. It's really great if you're going to be going up and down, but also if you need to squeeze something really, really tightly. As you can see, I've got great horned owl talons perched on a branch. Got two toes in front, two toes in back, but one of those back toes can flip forward into the standard three toes in front, one toe in back perching bird configuration. And then we have this action shot of a snowy owl's murder mittens as it's just coming in to scoop up that raptor. It's going to grab on tight and then it's just going to squeeze until that prey is no longer going to be running off. Incredibly adaptable foot structure. It also gives them an incredible amount of strength, which is important when you're going to be crushing that prey. Owl talons also have an additional adaptation. They've got this really neat looking comb structure. And this is something that you're very unlikely to see on a wild owl simply because it's not going to let you get a good look at it. But you can see it in museum mounts and specimens quite easily. It's circled in blue here. This is the little pectinate claw, and this helps them better groom their feathers. The feathers themselves of an owl are also adaptations to better help them survive and thrive in their environments. Many of our owls have what we call cryptic coloration. So these owls' plumages are designed to help them blend in. Even if we're talking about an apex predator like the great horned owl, there are going to be periods of time where they are not going to want to draw attention to themselves. They just want to blend into the background and not be bothered by a million crows as they try to sleep through the day. So oftentimes we will see this cryptic coloration, lots of browns, tans, grays, blacks, in patterns of stripes and spots to otherwise break up the shape of the bird. And then additionally, our owls have incredibly soft feathers. And this leading edge of a primary feather that's pictured here. This is actually a fine comb edge of their leading primaries. This is the edge of the feathers that cuts into the wind. And because this tiny comb exists on it, it actually breaks up the passage of the air over the wing into something called microturbulences. And because that air has been broken up, it deadens the noise, which is further quieted by the softness of the feathers. And the end result is a bird that can fly almost completely silently. We're actually going to take a look at a demonstration of this. So for this, We have scientists that are watching and documenting birds fly over some very high-powered microphones. So they are measuring the decibels produced with every wing beat. We're going to see three species fly. And all three species are found here in North America. We're going to start off with the rock pigeon, followed by the peregrine falcon, and then finally our barn owl.
Good girl. Oh, jeez.
Peregrine falcon. So it turns out if you're the fastest animal in the world, you don't really
And
have
now,
to be quiet.
it's Kenz's turn.
Shh. Jerry.
So this is an excellent demonstration of just how silent these birds can be, which is incredibly important because many of them are hunting prey with very sensitive hearing. And the moment you make a noise in the pursuit of that rat or that vole or even an earthworm, if we're talking about something tiny like a western screech owl, that noise can be an indication to that prey that something is dangerous and they need to find shelter. So any extra seconds or microseconds that you have as a predator to drop down onto your prey before they're aware of you, that means you're going to be so much more successful in your hunts, which means the next ones are going to be easier in the future. So we are talking, of course, about Santa Clara County's owls this year, or this evening, rather. And Santa Clara County is home to some incredible biodiversity, including about 420 species of birds, only 9 of which are owls. And we're only going to be talking about a fraction of those owls this evening. But we're going to be talking owls. Let's zoom out just a little bit before we get into the minutia.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. As she mentioned, before we get started with talking about our local owl species, I'd like to put them into the broader context of the global picture of owls. All owls belong to an order or a large group of birds called the strigiforms, which is simply Latin for anything that looks like an owl. There are about 250 species of owls throughout the world. The order of strigiforms is further broken into 2 families that are neither the same size nor the same genetic diversity. The first family is the Titanidae, which might be better known to a lot of you as the barn owls. There are only 20 species in this family throughout the world, broken into 2 genera. In fact, there's only 1 barn owl species that's found in the United States. The other family is the Strigidae, which is all the other owls. Sometimes these are called typical owls or true owls. This is, of course, a big family, almost 230 species, divided into 23 genera. There are 49 species of owls that have been documented in North America. As Carolyn mentioned before, 9 of them have been found in Santa Clara County, so that's almost 20% of the owl species that are found on the continent. In this image, you can see the typical member, our local typical member of the barn owl family, the American barn owl on the left, and a couple of the other owls that are found in our county. I wanted to show you these images so you can get a sense of one of their key visual differences, which is the barn owl has a somewhat elongated face in a heart shape. You can even see a sort of brown outline on the bird's face that looks like a heart. If you compare that facial disc to the faces of the owls on the other side of the screen, on the right side of the screen, you'll notice that the other birds have just much rounder faces. This is the key visual difference between these 2 families of owls. There are some other physical differences as well, but this is the key one that you are most likely to notice. This is a chart of the owl species that have been documented in our county. The chart shows the frequency with which each species is reported in each month of the year. The numbers to the right of the owl's names are called rarity codes. Number 1 is a species that's abundant in our local landscape, running all the way through number 6, a species that's so rare as to be an exception to the rule. The asterisks indicate birds that breed in our county. Tonight, we're going to be talking about 5 of these species. 3 of them are the most common owls found in our county. The great horned owl may be the most abundant, the American barn owl, the sole representative of the barn owl family locally, and the western screech owl. We're also going to talk about the northern pygmy owl and the northern saw-whet owl. As you can see here, they are not as frequently reported as our more common owls. This is probably because they're present in fewer numbers, but also because they are a bit harder to find.
Pretty significantly so. All the literature I found made note of how difficult they were to observe.
I want to thank, finally, I want to note one more owl as an honorable mention here, and that is the burrowing owl, an iconic owl of conservation concern here in our county. Our organization has done a lot of work on conserving these birds. They appear to be frequently observed here, but that frequency report probably has a lot more to do with the fact that people like to go to places where these owls are found and submit checklists listing these owls. They actually aren't that many of them here. We're not going to be talking a lot about these birds tonight because in January, for an earlier speaker series presentation, local biologist Phil Higgins, who has been researching and working on these birds for years, gave us a standalone presentation on them, and we encourage you to go check that out. And finally, just a couple of pointers or thoughts I wanted to leave you with as we start to talk about the individual species, which might help you understand how we're describing them. The first thought is that our 3 most common species, again, the great horned, the American barn, and the western screech, are really very distinct birds in our landscape. They look and sound different from other birds and from one another. So I'm hoping that this will make it easier for you to recognize them. Secondly, most owls are more active at night. And of course, we don't see very well in the dark. So you are far more likely to hear an owl than to see one. Learn their sounds, and we're going to be talking about that and sharing those sounds as we discuss these individual species. So let us dive in and start with the most magnificent of our local owl species in terms of sheer size and presence, and that is the great horned owl, or Bubo virginianus. The bird's scientific name means the Virginian owl because the bird was first described in the 1700s during the American colonial period. The California ornithologist William Leon Dawson, however, wrote humorously in the 1920s that the bird would be better called Bubo horribilis and compared it to the grizzly bear, which also has the Latin word for horrible in its scientific name. Suffice it to say, these birds have been impressing people with their majesty for a very long time. The great horned owl is found throughout North America, from Alaska to Central America, and is omnipresent in the lower 48 states. It does not migrate. This bird is one of the tallest and heaviest owls on our continent. It's a bit bigger than a house cat and weighs about 3 to 4 pounds, which is about a half a gallon of milk. So think about that when you go to the store. It also has a 4 to 5 foot wingspan, which is as wide as many people are tall. It is far and away the largest owl found in our county. Honestly, this bird is recognizable by its size alone. It is simply a very big owl. That said, though, let me give you a few ID basics. As you can see in these pictures, the great horned owl has yellow eyes and a black bill and a brown or gray face and a white throat patch. Its ear tufts or horns are large and they can be tucked down and flattened against the head too. The bird has intricately modeled brown, cinnamon, gray, and white plumage, which allows it to blend in really well with the trees, that cryptic plumage that Carolyn mentioned earlier. Depending on where you are in the Americas, its colors can vary, allowing it to blend in more with its local landscape. Male and female birds look alike, but the males are slightly smaller. To me, the great horned owl's call is cinematic. It's the stereotypical owl call of Hollywood films. This bird hoots. Hoo, 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 hoo. I'm going to play you a clip of a great horned owl calling near my house last fall. I recorded this at about 11 o'clock in the evening. So that to me really is the classic call of this bird. Sometimes a male and female bird, sorry, male and female birds will call back and forth to each other, and we call this duetting. The male bird, although he's smaller than the female, has a deeper voice, and so they really do have two distinct voices that you can distinguish when they are talking to each other. I'm going to play you a sound clip now that will start with the male calling, then the female responding, male calling again, and then it sort of descends into a cacophony. So,
You just gotta chat with each other.
exactly. So here we go. The male bird, female response. Male says something again, and now here we go. Definitely talking to each other. So that's the sound of a duet. And these birds are often heard around sunset or sunrise, although really I have heard of them at all times of the night. As you can see in this distribution map, the great horned owl is found in lots of different parts of our county, from the forests of the Santa Cruz Mountains all the way to the heart of downtown San Jose. This is because these birds can thrive in a wide variety of habitats: deciduous and coniferous forests, agricultural areas, urban and suburban spaces. As bigger birds, though, they really do want to be in larger trees. So look for them in oaks or eucalyptuses, cottonwoods, and sycamores. Again, because of their size and that tremendous wingspan, they really need a more open canopy so they can spread their wings and fly through the trees. Generally, they want to be near open spaces so they can hunt. So this could be like clearings in woods or fields or residential areas.
All right, so our next bird, we're not going in taxonomic order, we're going in size order today. So this is the American barn owl, Tyto fricata. This is a bird that has been recently chunked out. Previously, the barn owl was just the barn owl. But when you have a species that's spanning the entire globe, it makes a lot of sense that there are, in fact, individual species there. So the American barn owl is a absolutely beautiful owl. It is quite pale in appearance. This is an owl with about a 3 to 4 foot wingspan, but they're only carrying about a pound of weight. So despite the large wingspan, still, like all of our other birds, quite lightweight. These are owls that thrive alongside people. They really did earn the name barn owl. And these birds very much have a reputation for moving into barns or sheds. We've seen them in water towers. They do have a liking for palm trees. So if you do have palms in your area, it's always a good idea to keep an eye out for owl signs. And you will often see these birds take up in nest boxes. And in fact, an interesting thing that we're seeing happen in our county and some of our municipal parks in Santa Clara County is the park systems are installing nest boxes to invite these birds in as a method of integrated pest management. And the idea behind this is an adult barn owl is easily capable of capturing up to 1,000 rodents in a year. That's a pretty significant number. And so if you can get these birds in your parks, suddenly you no longer have to worry about that rodent population going out of control because you have a natural predator that's hanging out in the same area as them. If rats are wandering around on your play structures at night, the barn owl is going to catch them. This reduces the amount of pesticides that our parks have to use, or sorry, not pesticides, rodenticides, which reduces secondary poisonings, which is very much a problem for many of our predatory animals. And it also gives these birds a place to live. Now, here's some of this cryptic coloration. So unlike the really detailed barring of our great horned owls, the American barn owl takes its cryptic coloration inspiration from spots and speckling. The breast is usually paler in color than the back and the wings, which tend to be more of a tawny golden brown color. But they will also have flecks of white and black and gray in there. And all of this quite effectively manages to hide this owl. Males and females are do have some small variations. The females do tend to be darker in color than the males. And then there is a little bit of a size discrepancy as well. So with the females, once again, being larger than the males, which does make a certain amount of sense if you look at how large those eggs are that they have to lay.
Would you like to play the sound clip?
I would love to play the sound clip. So our barn owls do not have the classic hooting noise of our great horned owls. These guys scream. So that's the wonderful noise you're going to be listening for while these birds hunt in your neighborhoods. It's not as pleasing to the ear or as immediately recognizable as a great horned owl. To my ear, it sounds a little bit like screeching tires, like somebody slamming on the brakes. And this sound does carry quite well, but it's not what you're expecting to hear from an owl. So it might take a little bit of extra effort to train your ears for it. These birds are distributed throughout both our urban and rural spaces, but they do like to hunt in more open fields and grasslands. So your best bet for finding these birds is going to be around spaces like large city parks with soccer fields, any schoolyards that you have locally, as well as our agricultural spaces. I have personally had the best luck finding American barn owls when I'm down in the Coyote Valley as the sun is setting. They just love to come up over the fields as the sun is setting. So that's really where I've managed to find most of the barn owls I've encountered personally here. Now, shrinking down in size once again, we have the Western screech owl. So we're back to the strigiforms, the standard owls. This little guy is absolutely adorable. And I'm going to call him a little guy because he's standing at about 6 inches tall. This is an owl you could fit in your pocket and then it would be incredibly angry with you. So maybe don't do that. But These little guys are an incredibly widespread species. They're actually one of the most common species of raptors that we have in our area, but because they are nocturnal and because they are tiny and incredibly talented at camouflage, it's very easy to walk past a western screech owl in the middle of the day and not even be aware of its existence. This little bird has, once again, a black beak and bright yellow eyes, which will help you spot this bird because once it shuts those little eyes, it just becomes part of the tree. Um, they are incredibly good at blending in, particularly with the bark of our oak trees. The chest is often marked by thicker vertical lines and then finer horizontal banding. And their coloration, at least in Santa Clara County, tends to be more of the grayish browns. Um, these little guys have an adorable little sound that they make. So it's a very cute, delicate little, it's almost more of a toot than a hoot. And to my ear, it sounds a little bit like the train whistles that we got as kids and then our parents hid from us. Um, it's delicate, it is soft, and it's definitely worlds apart from the vocalizations of the barn owls or the great horned owls. So definitely something to keep an ear out for at night. These owls also have plumicorns, which is the technical term for those fluffy horns on the tops of their heads, as well as the horns of the great horned owls. They're not attached to their ears. They're definitely not horns. These are just little tufts of feathers that the owls use to both communicate with themselves as well as to obscure their shape. So here we have a western screech owl just on the verge of closing its eyes, and you can see just how well it blends in with both the tree bark as well as the bare dead wood of this tree. Once those eyes close, this bird becomes part of the snag itself, just another dead piece of wood on a tree. Western screech owls are one of the owls that will take up in nest boxes. Although this picture here is not of a nest box, but of a hole that it looks like maybe a woodpecker made in the side paneling of a house or a cabin. So these little guys are cavity nesters, although they are going to rely on things like woodpeckers or the natural decay of a tree in order to get those cavities to build their nests. As I mentioned before, western screech owls, incredibly widely distributed. You can find them in the hills, you can find them along the bay, in our neighborhoods, in our cities. But as I mentioned, tiny bird, smaller, quieter bird too. So they are harder to find in our neighborhoods. So once again, we've got this issue of a bird that we're pretty sure is widely distributed and quite common, but its natural behaviors make it very difficult for us to observe it and thus document it.
Well, moving on to yet another petite owl in our area. This is the northern saw-whet owl, or Aegolius acaricus. This bird gets its name as saw-whet because some people in the past thought that its calls sounded like a saw being sharpened on a whetstone. A somewhat obscure reference for us 21st century folk, but people have been listening to these birds for a while. The Latin name means the Acadian owl, and Acadia in this case refers to the former French colonies on the eastern seaboard. In fact, this bird was first called the Acadian owl when it was described in the 1700s. The northern saw-whet owl is present throughout most of the United States and southern Canada, and there are both migratory and non-migratory populations. The birds that we observe locally include residents and probably some migrants as well. To give you a sense of the trickiness of studying these little birds, I'm going to read you two quotes. Here's the first one from the California ornithologist Mr. Dawson from the 1920s. There are men aplenty, reputable ornithologists among them, who never saw a saw-whet owl and who do not know their notes. Fast forward 100 years to Birds of the World, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's encyclopedia. They write, studying saw-whet owls is difficult because they are secretive, nocturnal, and have irregular movement patterns. Suffice it to say that this bird is seldom seen, so seldom that I couldn't find a photo of it in our archives, and I've never seen one myself. So, although I'll describe it, it'll be brief. This is one tiny bird. It is one of the smallest North American owls, about 7 to 8 inches in height. That's about the size of your average paperback book. It's in the same weight category as a robin, about 2 to 5 ounces. These birds have big heads in proportion to their bodies, bright yellow eyes, and no ear tufts. Looking at these images on the slide, on the left you have an adult, and on the right you have 3 very adorable juveniles.
So cute.
You can see that the adult bird, again, the one on the left, has mottled brown, chestnut, and white feathers. The birds of all ages have a very distinct, heavy, bright V on the brow of their heads. And this is, again, a characteristic that will help you distinguish it from the pygmy owl, which we'll talk about later. The male and female birds look the same, although the female is slightly larger.
Love to see just how tiny that male is then.
So elusive as these birds are, you will hear them if you are in the right place at the right time. The right place generally means forests. The right time of year would be the winter, say November through March, at the start of their breeding season when they are calling to attract mates. And the right time of day is always night. Their calls remind me of sonar pings. It's a periodic monotone tooting call. So I'm going to play that for you now. So what you have just heard are what we call advertising calls, and they're given by male birds on their territories. Going back to the ornithologist William Leon Dawson, he writes, in the ardor of midnight under a full moon, this suitor whoops it up at a rate of about 3 whoops in 2 seconds. In this pace he maintains with the unfailing regularity of a clock. But to prevent his lady love from going to sleep, he changes the key occasionally. I really can't think of a pithier way to describe this bird's calls. Finally, as alluded to earlier, this bird is hard to find, and indeed you can see it is not often observed in our area. It is really a bird of the forests, and particularly coniferous forests in the mountains, and this map shows that very well. You can see that most of the observations in our area are in the Santa Cruz Mountains. There's a few in the Diablos as well. These birds can be found among Douglas firs and redwoods and pines. So, despite emphasizing how elusive these birds are, I also want to say that I personally have heard them a few times up in the Santa Cruz Mountains at night. So again, I think it's just a nice illustration of how important it is to understand the habitat preferences of birds.
And the last and littlest owl we are talking about this evening is the northern pygmy owl. This little cutie is absolutely tiny. It's about 2.3 ounces. So you stick a stamp on that and you can get it in the mail. 15-inch wingspan. This is actually a bit of an oddity of the owls that we're talking about today because these birds are diurnal. So rather than hunting at night, like all the other owls we've discussed today, the northern pygmy owl actually prefers to hunt during the daytime. And it does have a couple of different adaptations that make that a little bit more possible for these birds. These are not owls with asymmetrical ears. They're not using their sense of hearing so much to guide them to their prey. They are very much looking for their prey during the daytime. And because we have a potential of spotting this bird in the daytime, it is good to note that they have a very similar flight pattern to a woodpecker. So kind of that loose wave sign, and undulating up and down as they switch between flapping their wings and just allowing themselves to coast. This is a bird that loves pines as well as creeks. So if you are along a creek and you are seeing some pine trees, that is a good potential habitat for these birds. The northern pygmy owl is incredibly striking. We've got this wonderful chestnut brown back. We've got speckles on the wings and the head, as well as a pale breast with dark vertical streaking. So quite a striking bird. I do want to point out that they also have sort of an eyebrow-like marking, similar to the northern saw-whet owl, but much finer. So this is an owl that is getting its brows done, but it's not doing brow lamination or anything like that. They're a little bit more subtle. These guys have a similar sound to the northern saw-whet owl, so we're mostly looking at or listening for differences in intonation and the pacing. Get some woodpeckers in the background. So the biggest difference for this vocalization for me is it almost seems like the northern pygmy owl is contemplating what it's going to say each time. With the saw-whet owl, like it's done its prep work. It knows what it's going to say. It just needs to set the pace. The pygmy owl is considering every single one of those little toots before it lets it out. And when we have a bird that is both tiny and active during the daytime, it may be that those vocalizations are a little bit more cautious because they are more concerned about drawing attention to themselves. Now, the northern pygmy owl has a fantastic reputation for punching above its weight class when it hunts. So the northern pygmy owl, as I said, very tiny bird. This little tiny bird of pretty much equal size to a robin has been documented hunting and successfully catching prey, including California quails, tree squirrels, northern flickers, and even backyard chickens. So while they won't quite manage the moose that's depicted in Rosemary Moscow's comic here, they definitely are going after prey that is significantly larger to it. And if they're not able to finish that meal, they do stash it away into tree cavities, as well as sometimes on sharp branches and sticks like our shrikes do. So they get a little bit extra when it comes to decorating. But absolutely adorable little bird. And another fun thing, and another fun adaptation that kind of brings us back into the reality of being a tiny predator that's active in the daytime. These little guys have false eye spots, these two black spots on the very back of their head. These false eye spots are intended, or we believe the function of them is to essentially give a predator sneaking up from behind this animal a second of hesitation of maybe those spots are actually eyes. Maybe this bird does know I'm here. And we see this throughout the animal kingdom. It's not just super tiny owls that have them. The American kestrel also has very evident eye spots on the back of its head. And it's a common thing to see in animals like butterflies. Here's one against a yerba mate can, just to really detail just how tiny these little guys are. And these birds, like the northern saw-whet owl, Far fewer reportings, but a good chunk of that does have to do with just how cryptic these birds are, um, and how difficult they are to find. So stick with the pine trees, stay along creeks, and you have a decent chance of spotting these birds. But you're not really going to have any luck in the middle of our cities and urban centers.
All right. So now that you've gotten an introduction to those five species, let's talk a little bit about the life history of owls and particularly their eating and breeding behavior. Since each species is a little bit different, we're going to focus in this section on our three most common owls. Again, great horned, American barn, and western screech. So let's start with food. Owls, of course, are famously hunters. They eat meat and are often apex predators in their local environments. Most owls hunt at night, although some do hunt during the day, and some of those night hunting owls will also hunt during the day when it's needed. And when needed usually means when you have a bunch of hungry young mouths back at the nest that need to be taken care of. So, a good time to actually look for some of those nocturnal owls during the day is actually during the breeding season. As Carolyn mentioned earlier, these owls have so many wonderful adaptations that make them excellent hunters. Their great vision, their wonderful hearing, and of course, those silent, silent wings that enable them to sneak up on their prey. Owls have two different hunting styles. The first is what we would call sit and wait or perch and pounce. With this style, the owl sits on the branch of, say, a tree, scans the environment using all of its wonderful sensory skills, and when it senses something that it's interested in, will fly down and pounce on it. Most owls hunt in this way, and in fact, our great horned and western screech use this method. A second method is called coursing or quartering the ground. This is just searching while you're in flight. And our very own American barn owl does just that. Right now, we're going to show you a video taken by a local owl enthusiast, Mike Hunt, of an American barn owl hunting here in Santa Clara County. So the bird takes off and is scanning, scanning, scanning the ground. Oh, got something of interest, dives down, and you can see that it's flying away with something dangling from its talons, going off to a perch. And now in this next clip, you can see it's got something that actually looks like a pretty nice juicy rodent hanging from its bill as it flies off. Owls kill their prey by piercing or crushing it with their talons, and also by nipping the back of its neck with their beak, severing the spinal cord and killing it. Smaller prey are often eaten whole. Larger prey items can be torn into pieces and then eaten. The great horned owl in particular has a predilection for decapitating its prey. So if you happen to find a headless dead animal lying around your yard, perhaps there was an owl involved.
Let's hope.
Owls, like a lot of birds, have to solve the problem of what to do with all the undigestible stuff that they eat. And because owls are eating their prey whole, they do end up with a lot of bits that just can't go through their system. So that includes bones and feathers and fur and hair. These two pictures I took in my neighborhood last summer. On the left, you see the sidewalk under a street tree where an owl has been perching at night. You can see there's a lot of white excrement on the pavement, and mixed in with that are sort of these brownish blobs of things. On the right, we have a close-up of one of those brownish blobs. This is what we call a pellet, and it is all the undigestible stuff from an owl's meal. So in this picture, you can see bones and fur and maybe some feathers. What happens is that inside the owl's body, the undigestible bits are essentially filtered out and kind of compressed into a wet mass. And at a later point in time, the bird regurgitates or throws up that mass. And this is often a way that we become aware that there are owls in our neighborhoods when we find these pellets. Interestingly, owl pellets can also be used to survey, essentially, the rodent species of an area because owls are such efficient hunters. Different owls eat different things, in large part due to their size differences. Our really big great horned owl is a generalist and an opportunist. It eats mostly mammals and a few birds. It likes rabbits and hares, gophers, mice, voles, and in the bird category, waterfowl. Here in this picture, taken by one of our members in these two pictures, you can see a great horned owl with what looks to me like perhaps a rabbit in its talons, flying off to a branch to enjoy its meal. The American barn owl is also a mammal eater, although it prefers mostly rodents. Our western screech owl will actually eat a wide variety of smaller prey. So, although it's also eating mammals and birds, it will eat crayfish and worms and insects too. Knowing what these birds eat tells you something also about their distribution on the landscape. Great horned and American barn owls eat similar foods and usually do not want to be in the same territory. And when I say do not want to be in the same territory, this usually means that the barn owls will skedaddle when the great horns show up.
Are you telling me that great horns are not taught to share their parents?
Apparently not, because in fact, it is known that great horns will also sometimes eat the American barn owl. In fact, our director, Matthew Daughter, has witnessed that in progress. So often when you are out listening for owls at night, often you are not going to hear both great horned and American barn in the same small space. Conversely, you may hear great horned and western screech in the same landscape. These birds are in very different size classes, eat very different things. You might think that the western screech could end up on the dinner menu for the great horned, and I think it does happen from time to time, but apparently they are just simply not the most delectable item out there for a great horned owl. So you may, in fact, find these two species in the same landscapes. So let's talk a little bit about nesting, breeding, and the next generation of these birds. First, our three common owl species are monogamous, and the great horned owl may in fact mate for life. Outside of the breeding season, these birds may be solitary or they may be in pairs. Western screech owl pairs stay together throughout the year. All of these owls are in family groups during the breeding season. So when is that season? First, we'll start with our great horned owl. It's an early nester, really an outlier. It usually lays eggs in the winter, starting sometime in January, running through, say, April or so. The American barn owl and the western screech owl are our classic spring breeders, laying their eggs between March and June. The barn owl may actually have a second brood or may nest again in the summer. And in fact, this is often the time of the year when I hear juveniles calling near my house. In the past couple of years and throughout the summer and into the early fall, I hear the calls of young barn owls in my neighborhood almost every night.
Screaming sweet nothings.
Owls do not make their own nests. Starting with our great horned owl, this is a bird that uses a really wide variety of locations. In our area, it has a really strong preference for reusing old nests of other large birds. So they will often use red-tailed or red-shouldered hawk nests or common raven nests. They also known to sometimes nest in tree cavities or on ledges on buildings. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a webcam on a nesting great horned owl family right now. It's actually located on a door jamb in a public botanical garden. These birds, I think, just because of their sheer size, tend not to be terribly concerned about how noticeable their nest might be. American barn owls, as Carolyn mentioned earlier, really like to nest in palm trees in our suburban areas. Not so much in a cavity, but perhaps like in a gap in the palm fronds. They also like tree cavities and, as she mentioned earlier, man-made structures like, yes, barns of their name. And of course, they're also going to use nest boxes. And if you're interested in that, you would need a particular design to attract these particular birds. And you can see a picture on the right here of barn owls in a nest box. On the left here, we have western screech owls. They are cavity nesters. They have a strong preference for oak trees and often locate themselves in holes that have been excavated by woodpeckers. They will also use nest boxes, but again, needs to be a nest box that's especially designed for them. Finally, as larger birds, the entire breeding process really takes longer than it would for our small songbirds. Owl eggs take longer to mature. Their nestlings spend more time in the nest, and the fledglings spend more time with their parents than, say, the young of much smaller birds. The eggs are also laid and hatch at different times, which can extend the breeding period even longer. The female adult incubates the eggs and stays in the nest with the eggs and the young, and the male brings food. A great horned owl pair will have 1 to 4 eggs. They incubate them for about 5 weeks. The young stay in the nest for 6 weeks or so, and then will be in the area with their parents up to 5 months after fledging. This is a significant period of time and tells you that these young birds really have a lot they need to learn from mom and dad before they can go off and be on their own. The American barn owl has perhaps the largest clutches, the largest number of eggs of our 3 common owls, laying up to 7. They incubate for about 5 weeks, and the nestlings are in the nest for the longest period of time, about 2 months. These birds will also stay in the vicinity of their parents for 2 to 3 months after they fledge. Finally, the western screech owl, our smaller of the 3, or smallest, I should say, of the 3. They lay between 3 and 5 eggs, incubate about 5 weeks. They're about 3 weeks in the nest, maybe a little longer, and will stay in the area with their parents for about 3 months after fledging. Finally, I just wanted to show you some pictures that I took last year of some great horned owl nests that I was lucky enough to observe here in California. On the left is a photo of a nest that was taken in March. The photo on the right was taken a month later in April, and you can see first that spring definitely sprang during this time period, making the nest actually much more obscure than it was originally. On the left, you can see that's a mom with one of her tiny little chicks. You can see that the young great horned owls are extremely fluffy. They're just covered with that white down.
They look a little bit like dust bunnies.
Yes. And on the right is actually an image, again, the same nest, but an older chick. I don't know if it's the same one or not. There were multiple in this nest. But again, it's the difference that a month makes. This picture here is of a different great horned owl nest, also from last spring. What I love this photo for, first of all, there are 4 young in this nest, so see if you can count them. What I love about this photo is it shows you what a difference a hatch date can make. A hatch date, say, difference of 1 or 2 days from your siblings. Each of those 4 owlets is a distinctly different size and at a different developmental stage.
The Russian nesting dolls of owls.
Here in these pictures, this is a mom from one of the nests that I observed. She was just kind of hanging out, relaxing, decided to take a little time away from the house for herself. What I like about these pictures is you can see on the left just how cryptic that owl's plumage is. She really is just part of that tree until, boom, on the right, she opens her eyes and you are drawn to her face because of those bright yellow eyes. And finally, in these two pictures, we have two different dads who were hanging out near two different nests. On the right, you have one also making as if he is part of the tree. And on the left, you can see again the visual characteristics that make these owls so striking, those bright yellow eyes. And in this case, you get a really nice view of his white throat patch. And when he would call to his mate, that patch swells dramatically, and it's really just a tremendous visual experience as well as being an amazing sound experience.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about conservation concerning these birds. So with any animal, habitat loss really drives population loss. If these animals have no place to live, then they're not going to be reproducing. There will not be replacement populations to replace any losses from disease or old age or injury. And these are predatory birds. We're not talking about birds with a particularly long lifespan. Most of the birds we've talked about are averaging about maybe 3, maybe 5 years of life out in the wild. So that replacement population is incredibly important. It's also really important to keep in mind, particularly with owls, to be an ethical observer and photographer. So this photograph here was taken by an ethical photographer, Julie McKinnon. She's one of our wonderful members, and she got this great photo of a parent great horned owl and two of its chicks. But photography photography ethics are a very important thing to keep in mind. You will notice that while we talked a lot about the habitats and where these birds are found today, we didn't give you any exact locations. The unfortunate reality is these are incredibly charismatic birds that everyone loves to see, but they're also incredibly sensitive, due in part to their largely nocturnal nature. It can be very damaging to have their days disrupted, disrupting their sleep. If people are getting too close to them, that increases their cortisol levels, their stress hormones. That can interfere with their reproduction efforts. So it may lead to them laying fewer eggs. It can also disrupt their hunting behaviors. And overall, those stress hormones are going to wear on the bird's immune system, making it more difficult for them to fight off disease or infections or parasites. So by being an ethical observer, we are ensuring that we are not disturbing the birds and their natural behavior. So if we are trying to sneak up on an owl and it suddenly turns its head towards you, congratulations, you have stepped too close to that owl. If the owls appear to be calm, they're going about their business, and then suddenly they are raising their plumicorns that some of our owls have, like the western screech or the great horned owls, that can be a sign of stress. But also, we don't want to broadcast where these owls are found. So oftentimes that means maybe delaying the publishing of our photos so that we're not posting pictures of a nest while the nesting season is happening. Many of our photographers, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, will actually use they will use computer programs to remove metadata from their photographs so that you can't get the geolocation of photographs. And we don't share out the locations of our owls. You do really have to know a person who knows where the owls are. Also, I mentioned previously, rodenticides can be incredibly impactful to both our owls and any of our raptors, any of our predatory animals. Using pesticides, using rodenticides, these are quick fixes to overpopulations of pests in our gardens, in our spaces. If you want a long-term control of those pest species, your best bet is to invite a predator into your space, and then they will keep a constant control of that pest population. What happens with rodenticides is you kill off a generation, and then more rodents will come in and repopulate very, very quickly. So your problem has not been solved. You just done a temporary fix. And unfortunately, it's very common for rodenticides to get into our predators. These toxins bioaccumulate. And unfortunately, with our owls, it usually only takes one poisoned rat to do them in. But it also accumulates with our other predators like bobcats, coyotes, and mountain lions. So rodenticides are an incredible danger that we have to keep aware of in California. Turning off outdoor lights at night can also help support these birds. Artificial light at night has been found to increase stress hormones. They have been found to disrupt circadian rhythms. And I'm not just talking about the birds here, I'm also talking about people. It can disrupt migratory movements as well as interfere with hunting behaviors as well. So these puddles of light that we put out with the lighting on sidewalks at night or even in parking lots, these lights disrupt the natural cycles within our ecosystems. And this is a fun one because not only are we seeing more cities in Santa Clara County adopt dark sky initiatives to reduce their light output at night, but we're also we're seeing this as a type of pollution that we can very quickly change and turn around. So this isn't like air pollution where we're constantly trying to get it out of the air or getting pollutants out of our watersheds. This is simply a matter of just flicking the switch off at night and the problem is fixed. So this is a very exciting advocacy topic. Another way you can help these owls is leave dead trees in the landscape when it is safe to do so. So we do recognize that dead trees can be very valid threats to public health and safety. Tree branches coming down on trails can obviously be a fatal accident. But if it is safe to do so, consider leaving that dead tree up. Maybe you just remove the branches that might fall out and you leave the stump. Or you just leave a dead branch that's still fully secured to the tree on it. This provides nesting habitat for animals like birds and woodpeckers, but it's also going to provide a really important food source in terms of bugs as well in your environment. You can also build a nest box for an owl. Western screech owls and barn owls are really the only owls we have in the area that will use nest boxes. And I will make a note to say, if you are going to install an owl box, don't do so right next to your home. The owls will keep you up through the entire breeding season. And last and not least, we do want to thank you for spending your evening with us and joining us for a group of enthusiasts being very excited about these owls. We've had a great time researching to put this presentation together, and we hope that you'll take this as inspiration to do a little bit of owling in your own neighborhood. Whether that means you sit in your local neighborhood park as the sun is setting, or maybe you just have the windows open at night and Merlin running on your phone.
Yes, thank you all very much for your time and interest.